The cafe, Marigold, according to the hand-painted sign, was nearly empty at this mid-afternoon hour. A young woman stood behind the counter, scrolling on her phone with a bored expression. She looked up as the bell above the door announced, "My entrance." "Hi there," she said with practiced cheer. "What can I get you?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. "Just a coffee, please. To go." Regular or decaf? Regular. Sleep was elusive enough without eliminating caffeine. As she prepared my order, I glanced around the small space. Exposed brick walls painted a warm cream. Wooden tables with mismatched chairs. Local art hanging in simple frames. The place had character, not polished or trendy, but inviting in its imperfection. "Here you go," the barista said, handing me a paper cup. "That'll be $3.50. I fumbled in my purse for my wallet, embarrassed to realize I hadn't carried cash in ages. Richard had always handled the money when we went out. "Sorry, do you take credit cards?" I asked. "Sure." She gestured to the card reader. As I waited for the transaction to process, my gaze fell on a small sign propped on the counter. "Help wanted, morning shift." "Your machine is asking for your PIN," the barista prompted. I entered the code, still staring at the sign. Help wanted. A job. Something to fill the endless empty hours stretching before me. "Are you still hiring?" I heard myself ask as she handed me the receipt. The young woman, Jamie according to her name tag, looked surprised. "Yeah, but it's pretty brutal hours. 6 a.m. to noon, Monday through Friday. Minimum wage plus tips. Minimum wage." After 29 years of comfortable upper-middle-class living, the concept should have been horrifying. Instead, I felt a strange spark of something. Interest? Challenge? "Is the manager here?" I asked. Jamie's surprise deepened. "You seriously want to apply? It's just making coffee and dealing with grumpy people before they've had their coffee." "Is that a no?" She shrugged. "Leon's in the back. I can get him if you want." "Please." While she disappeared through a swinging door, I questioned my own sanity. What was I thinking? I knew nothing about making coffee beyond pressing buttons on my home machine. I hadn't worked a service job in my life. My fingers ached on cold mornings, and standing for 6 hours would be torture. Yet something about this shabby little cafe called to me. Perhaps it was simply so different from the polished, curated world Richard and I had inhabited. Perhaps it was the chance to be someone new, someone who carried no expectations, no history. The swinging door opened again, and a man emerged, 40-ish, with black hair streaked with silver at the temples, warm brown skin, and sharp eyes that assessed me with undisguised skepticism. "Jamie says you're asking about the job," he said without preamble. "Yes." I straightened, suddenly conscious of my no longer perfectly dyed hair, my lack of makeup. After 29 years, building from rock bottom. The sound of shattering glass exploded through our dining room. I stared at my hands, empty now, where seconds before I'd held the crystal wine goblet, a wedding gift from 29 years ago. Red wine spread across our pristine cream tablecloth like blood. "For God's sake, Diana," Richard snapped, tossing his napkin down. "That's the second glass this month. What's wrong with you lately?" The fury in his voice made me flinch. These days, everything I did seemed to irritate him. The way I loaded the dishwasher, how I folded his shirts, even my laugh, which he once, said was what made him fall in love with me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, already rising to clean the mess. My hands, the arthritis. He didn't respond, just checked his watch impatiently. I could feel his eyes following me as I grabbed a cloth from the kitchen. When I returned, he was typing on his phone, his face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. Who was he texting at 7:30 on a Tuesday night? I knelt beside the table, carefully picking up glass shards, when the words fell from his mouth like stones. "You've let yourself go. I'm leaving you for someone younger." My fingers froze around a jagged piece of crystal. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him, that this was some cruel joke. I looked up. Richard didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. His blue eyes, The same eyes I'd gazed into on our wedding day 29 years ago were cold and determined. The kitchen light caught on his freshly dyed hair, not a hint of gray allowed at 57. "What did you say?" My voice was barely audible. "You heard me." He set his phone down deliberately, as if preparing for a business meeting. "This isn't working anymore, Diana. It hasn't been for years." I carefully placed the glass shards on my napkin and pulled myself up to sit. My knees ached from the tile floor, but that pain was nothing compared to the one spreading through my chest. 29 years of marriage, and you tell me this over lasagna? The calm in my voice surprised even me. Richard had the audacity to look annoyed, as if I was being unreasonable. "Would you prefer I wait until our anniversary next month? Make a big scene at the restaurant?" I set my fork down carefully, aware of how loud it would sound against the ceramic plate in the silence that followed. My hands trembled slightly. "How long?" I finally managed. 6 months. He dabbed at his mouth with the cloth napkin I'd ironed that morning. "Her name is Vanessa. She's 34. The number hit me like a slap. I was 54. 20 years older than his replacement. Were you going to tell me? Or just keep eating the meals I cook while sleeping with her? Diana. His tone carried that patronizing edge I'd grown used to over the years. Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be. I've already spoken to my lawyer. You can keep the house. It's practically paid off anyway. And the car. It's got high mileage, but it's reliable. He said this as though he were doing me an enormous favor. The details of my discarded life were being sorted neatly, like items for a garage sale. What's worth keeping? What can be thrown away? Around us, the dining room looked the same as it had for decades. The china cabinet filled with wedding gifts. The landscape paintings Richard's mother had given us. The framed photos of Emily, our daughter, now living in Australia with her husband and our twin grandchildren. Grandchildren Richard had seen exactly twice in their 5 years of life. Max, our aging golden retriever, thumped his tail from his bed in the corner, oblivious to the implosion happening at the dinner table. "And Max?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Richard's nose wrinkled slightly. "Vanessa's condo doesn't allow pets. Besides, he's getting old and he's always been more attached to you. Of course. The old dog would stay with the aging wife. A matched set of discards." I nodded slowly, feeling numb. "When?" "Tonight." He pushed back from the table. "I've packed while you were at your sister's yesterday. I'm meeting Vanessa at the penthouse downtown." Just like that. 29 years, reduced to a 15-minute conversation over cooling pasta. The penthouse. I remembered when we'd looked at it together 10 years ago when Richard's first big promotion came through. I'd argued against it. Too ostentatious, too cold with its steel and glass. We'd bought this house instead with its creaking. Stairs and garden space for Emily to play. Now Vanessa would have the penthouse I'd rejected. Was she the sort of woman who belonged in sleek, modern spaces? Who wore stilettos instead of the comfortable shoes my feet now required? Who still turned heads when she walked into a room? I watched as Richard stood, straightened his expensive shirt, the one I'd given him for Christmas, and walked out of the dining room. Minutes later, I heard him dragging suitcases down the stairs. I didn't move from my chair. The half-eaten lasagna congealed on my plate, the shattered wine glass, still in pieces on the floor. A door opened and closed upstairs. Richard's footsteps on the stairs again. He paused in the dining room doorway, suitcases in hand. "My lawyer will contact you." His voice was businesslike now. "The sooner we get this done, the better for everyone." I stared at him, this stranger, wearing my husband's face. 29 years, I whispered. Something flickered across his features. Regret? Guilt? Whatever it was, he quickly mastered it. "Emily will understand," he said, answering a question I hadn't asked. "She's an adult. And you know we've just been going through the motions for years. Had we?" I searched my memories desperately. Yes, there had been silence, routine, the comfortable distance of a long marriage. But going through the motions? When had that happened? When did the man who once couldn't bear to leave for work without kissing me goodbye decide I was just... Furniture? I'll be in touch. Richard checked his watch again. There's leftover money in the household account for this month's expenses. I couldn't speak, couldn't even nod. He hesitated, perhaps waiting for a response, then turned and walked away. When the front door closed with a decisive click, the house fell into a silence so profound I could hear the second hand of the kitchen clock ticking. Tick, 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 counting down the seconds of a life that no longer existed. Max limped over and rested his graying muzzle on my lap. I buried my fingers in his soft fur and finally allowed the tears to come. That night, I slept on my side of the bed, the other half untouched, still made with hospital corners the way Richard preferred. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment of our marriage, searching for the warning signs I'd missed. Had it been when he started working late 3 nights a week? When he began criticizing my clothes, suggesting I make more of an effort? Or was it earlier, when the light in his eyes stopped igniting when I entered a room? Max snored softly from his bed on the floor, occasionally twitching with dreams. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went downstairs. The broken wine glass was still there. I'd forgotten to clean it up properly. Like my marriage, it lay in pieces on the floor, beyond repair. I swept up the shards and scrubbed at the wine stain until my fingers were raw. Then I sat in Richard's leather armchair in the dark living room, wrapped in the throw blanket that still smelled of his cologne. Dawn found me there, dry-eyed and hollow. The phone rang at 7:30, Maggie, my sister, calling for our weekly check-in. "How's everything?" she asked cheerfully. "Richard left me," I said, my voice flat. "For his 34-year-old girlfriend." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "I'm coming over," she finally said. "Don't move." 40 minutes later, she burst through my front door without knocking, arms loaded with grocery bags. Maggie, 5 years younger, divorced for a decade, fiercely independent, took one look at me sitting motionless in Richard's chair and swore colorfully. "That absolute bastard," she hissed, dropping the bags and pulling me into her arms. "When?" "Last night." "Did you know about her?" I shook my head against her shoulder. 6 months, he said. "Her name is Vanessa." Maggie's arms tightened around me. "I'm going to kill him. Slowly." Despite everything, I found myself smiling weakly. "You'd look terrible in prison orange." She pulled back and studied my face. "You haven't slept?" "No." "Or eaten breakfast?" "I'm not hungry." "Tough." She marched into the kitchen, digging through the grocery bags. "I'm making eggs and toast, and you're going to eat every bite. Then we're calling a lawyer." I followed her mechanically. The kitchen looked bizarre in the morning light. Dinner dishes still on the table, the wine stain a dark bruise on the tablecloth. "Sit," Maggie ordered, already cracking eggs into a bowl. I obeyed, watching as she moved efficiently around the kitchen that was more familiar to her than her own. How many Sunday dinners had she joined us for over the years? How many Christmas cookies had we baked together at that counter? "Did he say why?" she asked, her back to me as she whisked the eggs. "I've let myself go," I quoted dully. Maggie spun around, spatula pointed at me like a weapon. "That's bullshit. You know that's bullshit, right?" I looked down at myself objectively. The extra 15 pounds that had settled around my middle after menopause. The silver roots showing at my temples. I was 2 weeks overdue for a touch-up. The reading glasses hanging from a chain around my neck. A concession to aging I'd fought against until headaches forced my hand. "Is it, though?" I asked quietly. Maggie slammed the bowl down. "Yes, for God's sake, Diana, you're 54, not dead. So what if you've got some silver hair and laugh lines? You raised his child, ran his household, entertained his clients, all while looking like a damn magazine model." Her fury on my behalf should have been comforting. Instead, it scraped against my numbness, threatening to break through to the pain beneath. "It doesn't matter now," I said. "He's gone." "It does matter." She turned back to the stove, her movements sharp with anger. "It matters because you're going to believe him if someone doesn't tell you what garbage that is." Max padded into the kitchen, looking between us curiously, then settled at my feet with a heavy sigh. "The dog stays with me," I said absently, reaching down to stroke his head. "The penthouse doesn't allow pets." "Of course it doesn't," Maggie muttered. "Probably has white carpets and those uncomfortable sofas no one actually sits on." The mental image, Richard and Vanessa perched awkwardly on some minimalist furniture, almost made me smile again. Almost. Maggie set a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. "Eat." I took a small bite, not tasting anything. My stomach roiled in protest, but I forced myself to continue under my sister's watchful eye. "What did he say about the divorce?" she asked when I'd managed half the toast. "His lawyer will contact me. He's letting me keep the house. And the car." "Letting. You?" Maggie's voice rose dangerously. "How generous of him to let you keep what's half yours anyway." I flinched at her volume. "And there's money in the household account for this month." "This month?" she repeated flatly. "And what about next month? What about your retirement? What about health insurance?" These questions hadn't even occurred to me yet. Richard had always handled our finances. I had a vague awareness of retirement accounts, investments, insurance policies, but the details, those lived in Richard's careful spreadsheets in the office I rarely entered. "I don't know," I admitted. Maggie reached across the table and gripped my hands. "Diana, listen to me. You need a lawyer. Today. Before that snake does something with the money. You thought he wouldn't cheat on you after 29 years, but here we are." She cut in ruthlessly. "The truth of that?" silenced me. "I know a good divorce attorney," Maggie continued. "Jessica Winters. She handled my friend Pat's divorce last year. That woman is a shark in a pencil skirt. Exactly what you need right now." "I don't want to fight," I said quietly. "I just want it over." That's the shock talking. Trust me, when it wears off, you're going to be furious. And when that happens, you'll want a lawyer who's already protected you. I pushed the plate away, unable to eat another bite. "I can't think about this right now." Maggie's expression softened. "I know, sweetie. That's why I'm thinking for you." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Jessica, and then I'm staying here tonight." I started to protest, but she held up a hand. "Non-negotiable. You shouldn't be alone." As she dialed, I looked around the kitchen. Really looked at it for the first time in years. The yellow walls Richard had never liked but tolerated. The outdated oak cabinets we'd always planned to replace someday. The refrigerator covered, with photos and postcards, Emily's graduation, the twins' birth announcement, the magnet collection from places we'd visited. "Yes, today if possible," Maggie was saying into the phone. "It's an emergency consultation. Yes, I understand the fee." Fee. Money. Another thing I'd have to worry about now. I had no income of my own, no recent job history, no marketable skills. I'd been Richard's wife for so long, I'd forgotten how to be anything else. 2:00, Maggie announced, ending the call. "I'm driving you." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. Max whined softly, nudging my hand with his nose, sensing my distress. "First, you need a shower," Maggie decided, pulling me to my feet. "And clean clothes. You'll feel better." I doubted that very much, but I let her guide me upstairs to the bathroom. As she turned on the shower, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Puffy eyes, pale skin, hair limp and unwashed. Had Richard looked at me yesterday morning and made his final decision? Had I failed some critical inspection I didn't know I was under? "Stop it," Maggie said sharply, catching my expression. "Stop wondering what you did. Wrong. This is on him, not you." She squeezed my shoulder and left me alone in the bathroom. I stepped under the hot water and tried to wash away 29 years of certainty, now revealed as illusion. The shower did help, marginally. Clean hair, fresh clothes, armor of a sort. Maggie drove us to the law offices of Winters and Associates in silence, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand. Jessica Winters was exactly as Maggie had described. Sharp, efficient, with a gaze that seemed to catalog my every weakness and strength within seconds of meeting me. Mrs. Pearson, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her imposing desk. I understand your husband has left you for another woman after 29 years of marriage. Hearing it stated so baldly made me flinch. Yes. And he's already moved. Out? Last night, she typed something into her computer. Do you know if he's consulted an attorney yet? He said he had. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. Did he mention which firm? I shook my head. All right. She leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk. I'm going to ask you some difficult questions now. Financial questions primarily. Do you know the state of your joint assets? Accounts, investments, property? I looked at Maggie helplessly. Diana hasn't been involved in their finances, my sister explained. Richard handled everything. Jessica's mouth tightened slightly. I see. Do you have access to any financial records? Bank statements? Tax returns? I don't know. Maybe in his office at home? Good. That's your first assignment. Gather every financial document you can find. We need to establish a complete picture of your marital assets before anything disappears. The implication made my stomach clench. Richard wouldn't steal from me. Jessica and Maggie exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Mrs. Pearson, Jessica said gently, I've been practicing family law for 20 years. I've seen devoted spouses of 3 decades empty joint accounts the day after leaving. Not because they were always dishonest, but because divorce makes people behave in ways they never imagined they would. I stared at my hands, noting distantly that I was still wearing my wedding ring. The simple gold band had grown into my finger over the decades, leaving a pale indentation beneath. Do you work outside the home, Mrs. Pearson? No. I used to. Before our daughter was born, I was an office manager for an insurance company, and that was how long ago? 26 years, Jessica made another note. You've been a homemaker since then? Yes. Richard's job involved a lot of business entertaining. I managed the household, the social calendar. Good, that's important to establish. Your contributions to his career advancement are relevant to the settlement. She tapped her pen against the desk. What about your health? Any chronic conditions? Just arthritis in my hands and knees sometimes. Any mental health concerns? Depression? Anxiety? I almost laughed. Not until yesterday. Jessica's expression remained neutral. Do you have your own health insurance or are you on your husband's policy? His, through his company. Another note. We'll need to address continuation of coverage in the settlement. The meeting continued for an hour. Questions about property, debts, Richard's income, our lifestyle. With each answer I gave, I realized how little I knew about the financial structure of my own life. So what happens now? I asked when Jessica closed her notebook. Now I draft a letter to your husband, or his attorney, once we know who that is, informing them that you've retained counsel. We'll request comprehensive financial disclosures and propose temporary support arrangements while the divorce is pending. Temporary support? Yes. You'll need living expenses, Mrs. Pearson. Mortgage payments, utilities, food, personal needs. Your husband has a legal obligation to maintain your standard of living until the divorce is finalized. The thought of taking Richard's money, of being a charity case, made me feel ill. I have some savings, I said, in my personal account. How much? I named the figure, a small amount I'd set aside from household money over the years for gifts. Personal items. Jessica's expression told me what she thought of that sum. Mrs. Pearson, you've been married for 29 years in what appears to be a traditional arrangement. The law recognizes your contribution as a homemaker as equal to your husband's financial contribution. You're entitled to support. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. One more thing, Jessica added. I recommend you stop communicating directly with your husband about the divorce. All communications should go through our offices. It protects you from making agreements out of guilt or emotional distress. Guilt. The word echoed in my mind. Should I feel guilty? Had my failings, the extra pounds, the arthritis, the gray hair, justified what Richard had done? You look exhausted, Jessica observed, her voice softening slightly. This is a lot to absorb in 24 hours. Go home, rest, and start gathering those documents. My paralegal will call you tomorrow to check in. Maggie drove me home in silence. My mind was a whirlwind of legal terms and financial concerns I'd never had to consider before. "You did great," she said as we pulled into my driveway. "Jessica will take care of everything. You just focus on getting through each day." But how was I supposed to do that? 29 years, my entire adult life, had been structured around being Richard's wife. I knew how to plan dinner parties for his colleagues, how to remember the names of their children, how to create a home that reflected his success. Without those duties, who was I? I unlocked the front door to find Max waiting eagerly, his tail thumping against the floor. At least someone still needed me. "I'll make some tea," Maggie announced, heading for the kitchen. I followed her, suddenly desperate not to be alone with my thoughts. "The divorce papers," I said. "Should I still sign them when they come?" "Absolutely not," Maggie called over her shoulder. "Not without Jessica reviewing them first. God knows what Richard's trying to pull." There it was again, the assumption that the man I'd shared my life with for nearly 3 decades would now try to harm me. The worst part was that I couldn't dismiss the possibility. The Richard who could leave over dinner wasn't the Richard I thought I knew. I sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted. "I need to check his office for those financial documents." "We'll do it tomorrow," Maggie promised, setting a mug of tea in front of me. "Right now, you need to rest." Rest. As if sleep could possibly come. But somehow it did. A deep, heavy slumber that claimed me shortly after dinner. I dreamed of drowning in dark water, Richard standing on the shore, watching impassively as I struggled. I woke gasping at 3 a.m., sheets tangled around my legs. Max raised his head from his bed, whining softly. I reached down to scratch his ears. "It's okay, boy. Just a bad dream." But it wasn't just a dream. It was my new reality. I got up and padded down the hall to Richard's office. I'd rarely entered this space. It was his domain, with its leather chair and organized shelves. Now I stood in the doorway, hesitant, as if he might suddenly appear and demand to know what I was doing. The room smelled of him, that specific blend of cologne and the mint gum he always chewed. I flipped on the light and approached his desk. The computer was gone. He'd taken it with him. But the filing cabinet in the corner remained. I pulled open the top drawer. Folders labeled with meticulous precision, tax returns, investment statements, insurance policies. Richard had always been organized to the point of obsession. Now that quality might actually help me. For the next 2 hours, I went through each drawer, pulling out anything that looked relevant. By dawn, I had neat stacks covering the desk, evidence of a financial life I'd been only vaguely aware of. Tax returns showing Richard's income had nearly doubled in the past 5 years. Investment statements from 3 different brokerage firms. Life insurance policies, his much larger than mine. Retirement account statements, again, his substantial, mine minimal. Property tax bills for the house. Car titles and insurance information, and buried in the back of the bottom drawer, something unexpected, a folder labeled Cayman account. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was documentation for an offshore account I knew nothing about, with a balance that made my breath catch. Why did Richard have a secret account with this much money? And how long had it existed? I set it aside in a separate pile. Jessica would need to see this first. Maggie found me there at 7 a.m., surrounded by papers, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. "Diana, did you stay up all night?" I gestured to the stacks wordlessly. She picked up the Cayman folder and whistled softly. Well, looks like Richard has some explaining to do. How could I not know about this? My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. Maggie squeezed my shoulder. "Because he didn't want you to know. That's not on you." But it felt like it was. Another failure to add to the list. Too trusting, too comfortable in my prescribed role, too willing to let someone else handle the complex parts of life. "I should call Jessica," I said. "After breakfast," Maggie insisted, "and a shower. Those papers aren't going anywhere." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Richard, need to get some files from the office. Coming. By at noon." "No, please, no. Is that okay?" Just an announcement of his intentions, as always. I showed the message to Maggie, whose expression darkened. Absolutely not. This is your house now. He doesn't get to just drop by whenever he wants. But, no buts. She grabbed my phone and typed a reply before I could stop her. Not a good time. Please have your lawyer contact Diana's attorney, Jessica. Winters, to arrange property exchanges. She hit send before I could protest. There! Professional boundaries established. The response came seconds later. Don't be difficult, Diana. I just need my files. Maggie snorted. As if you're the one being difficult. Block him. I can't just block my husband of 29 years. Ex-husband, she corrected firmly. And yes, you can. Or at least don't respond. Let Jessica handle him. I stared at the phone, torn between habit and self-protection. For nearly 3 decades, I'd arranged my life around Richard's needs and preferences. Breaking that pattern felt like trying to stop breathing. He'll be angry, I said weakly. Good. Maggie's tone was fierce. He should feel something about this mess he's created. She dialed Jessica's office while I stood frozen, the phone clutched in my hand. After a brief conversation, she handed me the phone. Jessica wants to speak with you. Mrs. Pearson, Jessica's crisp voice came through. I understand your husband is trying to access the marital home. He wants to get some files from his office. And you found financial documents he may be interested in, including evidence of an undisclosed account? Yes. Excellent work. Her tone warmed slightly. Here's what we're going to do. My assistant will come to your home immediately to collect and copy all financial records. Once we have copies, your husband can have access to the originals, but only with supervision and only after we've secured everything. The efficiency of her plan was reassuring. Okay. In the meantime, do not communicate further with him. Forward any messages directly to me. He'll be here at noon, I said, anxiety creeping into my voice. My assistant will arrive by 11. And Mrs. Pearson? You don't have to be present when he comes. In fact, I'd prefer you weren't. The thought of avoiding a confrontation with Richard brought immediate relief. Thank you. After ending the call, I slumped into the desk chair. She's sending someone to get the documents, and she says I should leave before Richard arrives. Smart woman, Maggie nodded approvingly. We'll go to my place, pack an overnight bag. You're staying with me for a few days. But Max brings his old furry butt, too. My building allows pets. I looked around Richard's office, at the evidence of a life we'd supposedly shared, but clearly hadn't. The diplomas on the wall, the family photo taken years ago when Emily was still in high school, the golf trophies from the club where he spent most weekends. Had he been planning this for months? Years? Had he set up that Cayman account specifically to hide money from me in the event of a divorce? The thought made me physically ill. I need to feed Max, I said, fleeing the office and its unanswerable questions. True to Jessica's word, her assistant, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, arrived at 11 with a portable scanner and several empty file boxes. I'll take care of everything, she assured me, already organizing the documents into categories. We'll get copies of every single page, including that offshore account. Should I have known about it? I asked hesitantly. Brenda paused in her work. Mrs. Pearson, I've been working with divorce cases for 15 years. The number of spouses, usually wives, who discover hidden assets during the process would shock you. You're not naive. You're normal. Her matter-of-fact tone was strangely comforting. I wasn't uniquely stupid or blind, just typical. By 11:45, Maggie was herding me and Max toward her car, an overnight bag hastily packed. As we pulled out of the driveway, I saw a sleek BMW turning onto our street, Richard's car. We passed each other, and for a brief moment our eyes met. His widened in surprise, then narrowed as he recognized Maggie behind the wheel. Don't look back, Maggie advised, as we turned the corner. Forward motion only. But I did look back, one quick glance in the side mirror. Richard was standing in the driveway, staring after us, his posture rigid with anger. For the first time since he'd left, I felt a flicker of something other than grief or shock. Anger. Maggie's apartment was a stark contrast to my house. small but modern with bold colors and contemporary furniture. No history hung from these walls, no ghosts lurked in the corners. "It's not much," she apologized, showing me to her spare room. "But it's husband-free." Max explored cautiously, sniffing unfamiliar territory before settling on a patch of sunlight near the balcony door. "He approves," I said with a faint smile. We were halfway through lunch when my phone rang. Jessica Winters. "Mrs. Pearson, I wanted to update you. My assistant successfully collected all the documents before your husband arrived. He was displeased." "Did he know what we found?" "No. Brenda simply informed him that all financial documents had been secured by your legal counsel and that any further communications should go through our office." I could imagine Richard's reaction to that. He hated losing control of any situation. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we analyze everything," Jessica replied, "particularly that offshore account. How long has it existed? What funds went into it? Was it disclosed on your tax returns? This could significantly impact the settlement negotiations." Settlement negotiations, the clinical term for dividing up nearly 3 decades of shared life. "And the divorce papers?" I asked. "When they come?" "You'll forward them to me immediately, unsigned," Jessica instructed. "Based on what we've found so far, I suspect his initial offer will be significantly below what you're entitled to." What was I entitled to? Half of everything? Half of a life that no longer existed? "I just want enough to live on," I said quietly. Jessica's tone turned gentle but firm. "Mrs. Pearson, this isn't just about immediate survival. It's about your future, retirement, healthcare, quality of life. Your husband enjoyed the benefits of your support for 29 years. The law recognizes that value, even if he currently doesn't." After the call ended, I sat on Maggie's couch, staring out at the unfamiliar view of downtown buildings. "She's right, you know," Maggie said, joining me. "You deserve half. Actually, you deserve it all after what he's done, but the law only gives you half." "Half of what, though? Half of a marriage that had apparently been failing without my knowledge? Half of assets that might be hidden in accounts I knew nothing about? I feel so stupid," I admitted. "All these years thinking we were partners?" "You're not stupid," Maggie insisted. "You're loyal. There's a difference." But loyalty felt like a liability now, a weakness Richard had exploited while preparing his exit strategy. The rest of the day passed in a blur of calls, from Jessica's office with questions about various documents, from my daughter Emily in Australia, who'd finally heard the news from her father. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Her voice, distorted by distance and technology, sounded hurt. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm still trying to process it myself. Dad says it's been coming for years, that you've both been unhappy." The familiar twisting in my stomach returned. Of course he would rewrite our history to justify his actions. And of course our daughter, 12,000 miles away, couldn't know the truth. "That wasn't my experience," I said carefully. "But marriages are complicated. He says he's still going to help with the twins' college fund. That's good." I tried to keep the bitterness from my voice. Such generosity from a man hiding money in offshore accounts. "Are you okay, Mom? You sound strange." No, I wasn't okay. I was adrift in a life I no longer recognized, facing a future I hadn't planned for. "I'm getting through it," I answered, which wasn't exactly a lie. "How are the twins?" She accepted the change of subject, filling me in on my grandchildren's latest adventures. I listened, trying to focus, but my mind kept returning to the offshore account, to Richard's secret preparations while I remained oblivious. That night, on Maggie's uncomfortable guest bed, sleep eluded me again. Max snored softly on the floor beside me, his presence the only familiar comfort in this strange new world. I reached for my phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media until a post stopped me cold. Richard at what looked like a rooftop bar, his arm around a gorgeous young woman. The caption, "New beginnings with this amazing man." Tagged, Vanessa Chen, marketing executive at a tech firm I vaguely recognized. The photo had been posted 3 days after he left. 3 days, and there he was, smiling broadly, looking younger, and happier than I'd seen him in years. I I clicked on her profile before I could stop myself. It was public, filled with glamorous photos, Vanessa at charity galas, Vanessa in yoga poses on exotic beaches, Vanessa networking with tech industry leaders, and scattered throughout the past several months, occasional glimpses of Richard at restaurants I didn't recognize, at a concert I hadn't known he attended, receiving an industry award I hadn't been invited to. 6 months, he'd said. The evidence suggested longer. I scrolled back further, compulsively tracking the beginning of their relationship through digital breadcrumbs. A photo from a tech conference 14 months ago, Richard barely visible in the background of a group shot. Another from a charity gala 10 months ago. They weren't together in the photo, but both were tagged as attendees. Then, 8 months ago, the first photo of just the two of them. Late working session with the brilliant Richard Pearson. Mentor, Monday mentor. Is that what they'd called it? I kept scrolling, watching their relationship evolve from professional to personal through carefully curated images. The comments becoming more flirtatious, the settings less and less business-related. By the time I reached the present, the sun was rising, painting Maggie's spare room with golden light. I'd spent the entire night watching my marriage unravel in reverse, documented by the woman who'd replaced me. Max whined, needing to go out. I dragged myself from bed, feeling hollowed out and ancient. Maggie found me in the kitchen, staring blankly at the coffee maker. "You look like hell," she observed, taking the mug from my unresisting hands and filling it herself. "I found Vanessa's social media," I admitted. She closed her eyes briefly. "Oh, Diana, why would you do that to yourself?" I needed to know. But what had I learned, really? That Richard had been unfaithful longer than he admitted? That Vanessa was beautiful and accomplished and young? That they looked happy together? None of it changed my situation. "Jessica called while you were in the shower," Maggie said, changing the subject. "The initial review of the documents looks promising, especially that offshore account." Promising how? Apparently it's been funded with regular transfers from Richard's primary account over the past 5 years. Money that should have been considered marital property. 5 years. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. Not just months of planning, but years. "Jessica thinks it strengthens your position considerably. She's preparing a comprehensive counteroffer to whatever Richard proposes." I nodded mechanically, not really absorbing the information. 5 years of secret financial planning. 14. Months of knowing Vanessa. How long had he been planning his escape from our marriage? And how could I have been so completely blind to it? "Diana." Maggie's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "Stay with me. One day at a time, remember? One day at a time." But which day? The day I discovered my husband's secret account? The day I found his girlfriend's carefully documented seduction? The day he told me I'd let myself go over cooling lasagna? Each felt like its own separate trauma. "I think I need to go home," I said suddenly. Maggie frowned. "Are you sure that's a good idea? What if Richard comes back?" "It's my house now," I said, echoing her words from yesterday. "And I can't hide forever." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but I'm checking on you every day, and you're keeping Jessica's number on speed dial." Home felt both familiar and alien when we arrived that afternoon. Richard's brief presence had left traces. A coffee cup in the sink, mail scattered. On the hall table, the lingering scent of his cologne in the office. I moved through the room slowly, Max following at my heels. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. The couch where we'd watched movies. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals. The bedroom where we'd slept, made love, argued, reconciled. All now just settings for a play that had ended. I found myself in Richard's closet, running my fingers over the few items he'd left behind. Old sweaters, worn shoes, a robe I'd given him years ago. Why had he taken some things but not others? Were these discards like me, too old, too worn, too familiar to be worth keeping? Anger flared again, hotter this time. I yanked the clothes from their hangers, stuffing them into a garbage bag with savage satisfaction. The shoes followed, then the contents of his drawers, old t-shirts, mismatched socks, the reading glasses he'd replaced with contact lenses. By the time Maggie found me, I'd filled 3 bags and was attacking his bookshelf. Business books he'd collected but never read, golf instruction manuals, the spy novels he consumed on vacation. "Whoa," she said from the doorway. "This is new." I looked up, breathing hard. "I'm getting rid of him." She nodded slowly. "Good, but maybe save the financial books? Might learn something useful." Her practical suggestion punctured my fury, and suddenly I was laughing, a strange hiccuping sound that bordered on hysteria. "Financial books," I gasped between laughs. "So I don't make the same mistake twice." Maggie wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "So you understand what he did, and so you can do better for yourself." The laughter died as abruptly as it had begun. "I don't even know where to start." "One book at a time," she said simply. "One day at a time." That night, after Maggie left, having extracted multiple promises that I would call if I needed anything, I sat in the living room with Max, surrounded by the ruins of my married life, and faced the question I'd been avoiding. Who was I without Richard? For 29 years, I'd been Mrs. Richard Pearson, mother of Emily, hostess, homemaker, supportive wife. Now Emily was grown with her own family, and Richard had discarded me for a younger model. What remained? I tried to remember the Diana, who had existed before Richard, the woman with dreams and ambitions of her own. She seemed like a stranger now, a faded photograph of someone vaguely familiar. I'd been 25 when we married, an office manager with plans to advance into human resources. I'd taken night classes, volunteered with professional organizations. I'd been determined, independent. When had I lost that woman? Had she disappeared when I became pregnant with Emily and we decided I would stay home? Or later when Richard's career took off and my role as corporate wife consumed more of my identity? I couldn't pinpoint the moment. It had happened gradually, like erosion. Small compromises, tiny surrenders, until the original shape of my life was unrecognizable. "We need to find her again," I told Max, who thumped his tail in agreement. That night, I dreamed I was excavating an archaeological site, carefully brushing away dirt to reveal a woman's face, my own, but younger, looking up at me with clear, determined eyes. I woke feeling strangely energized. For the first time since Richard left, I didn't immediately think of him. Instead, I thought about that younger Diana, buried under decades of compromise, waiting to be rediscovered. The divorce paperwork arrived by courier later that morning. Thick, intimidating documents full of legal language I barely understood. As instructed, I called Jessica immediately. "Don't sign anything," she repeated. "I'll review everything and contact you." "Is there anything I should do in the meantime?" There was a slight pause. "Have you thought about what you want to do next? Mrs. Pearson, after the divorce is finalized?" The question caught me off guard. No, not really. It might be worth considering. Many of my clients find that developing a vision for their future helps them make clearer decisions during the settlement process. A vision for my future. What did that even look like at 54? Return to work? Where? Doing what? My skills were hopelessly outdated, my resume a blank space spanning nearly 3 decades. "I'll think about it," I promised, though the task seemed overwhelming. After the call, I wandered through the house, seeing it with new eyes. It was too large for just me and Max, too expensive to maintain on whatever settlement I might receive, too full of memories to allow a fresh start. Maybe I should sell it. Buy something smaller, more manageable. But the thought of more change made my stomach knot with anxiety. One crisis at a time. The days blurred together after that, meetings with Jessica, phone calls about financial disclosures, texts from Maggie, checking in. I existed in a strange limbo, neither married nor officially single, suspended between past and future. My body felt the stress. I lost weight without trying, my clothes hanging loose. Sleep remained elusive most nights. The arthritis in my hands flared painfully, aggravated by tension. "You need to take care of yourself," Maggie insisted during one of her now daily visits. "When was the last time you ate a proper meal?" I couldn't. "Remember, that's it," she declared. "Get your coat. We're going out. I'm not hungry. Didn't ask if you were hungry. Said we're going out. Too tired to argue, I let her drive me to a small Italian restaurant I'd never visited, despite it being just 15 minutes from my house. Richard had preferred fancier establishments, where being seen was as important as the food. The owner greeted Maggie by name, embracing her with genuine warmth. "And this must be your sister," he said, turning to me. "Welcome. Any sister of Maggie's is family here." The restaurant was cozy, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wax-covered bottles. No white linen, no hushed voices, no carefully cultivated ambiance, just warmth and the tantalizing smell of garlic. "Tony makes the best lasagna in the city," Maggie told me as we were seated. Lasagna. The meal Richard and I had been eating when he ended our marriage. My appetite, already minimal, vanished completely. "I can't," I whispered. Maggie's expression softened in understanding. "Soup, then, and bread. You need to eat something, Diana." The minestrone was rich and hearty, the bread crusty and warm. I managed a few spoonfuls, then a few more, surprised to find myself actually hungry. "Good, right?" Maggie smiled. I nodded, taking another piece of bread. "This place is lovely. How did you find it?" "After my divorce," she explained. "I was trying new things, going places David and I had never gone together. Creating new memories. New memories. The concept was both daunting and appealing. Could I build a life so different from the one I'd known that the pain of Richard's betrayal would fade into background noise? "How long did it take?" I asked. "To feel normal again?" Maggie considered the question. "It wasn't a single moment. More like a series of realizations. The first time I went a whole day without thinking about him. The first time I made a major decision without wondering what he would think. The first time I went to bed feeling content with my own company. And now," she smiled. "Now he's just someone I used to know. A chapter in my life, not the whole story." That night, lying in bed, I turned her words over in my mind. Richard as a chapter, not the whole story. But he'd been such a long chapter, nearly 3 decades. What could possibly fill the remaining pages? The next morning, after another restless night, I found myself drawn to Richard's office again. This time I wasn't looking for financial documents, but for something else, something I wasn't sure still existed. The bottom drawer of the filing cabinet held older records, tax returns from the 1990s, the deed to our first small house, Emily's birth certificate. And there, in a folder labeled Diana Personal, I found what I was searching for. My college diploma, my early resume, certificates from professional development courses I'd completed before Emily was born. Evidence that I had once been more than Richard Pearson's wife. I spread the papers across the desk, studying them like artifacts from a lost civilization. Diana Mitchell, my maiden name, had been ambitious, educated, skilled. She had received performance reviews describing her as detail-oriented, highly organized, and demonstrates leadership potential. Where had that woman gone? I gathered the documents and took them to the dining room table, the site of Richard's betrayal now repurposed as my workstation. Taking a notebook, I began listing skills I'd had then, and skills I might have developed since. Office management, bookkeeping basics, event planning, volunteer coordination at Emily's schools, fundraising for various charities, budget management for our household. It wasn't much for 29 years of adulthood, but it was a start, a foundation to build upon. Energized by this small step, I opened Richard's laptop that he'd left behind and navigated to a job search website. Scrolling through listings for office managers and administrative assistants, my initial optimism quickly faded. Every posting seemed to require proficiency in current office software, or experience with cloud-based systems, or social media management skills. I had none of these. By noon, my earlier energy had evaporated, replaced by a familiar sense of inadequacy. The job market had moved on without me. I was a relic, as outdated as the paper resume in my folder. Maggie called just as I was about to. "Close the laptop in defeat. Checking in," she announced. "How are you today?" "Unemployable," I answered with bitter honesty. What? I explained my morning's research and disappointing conclusions. Of course you're struggling, she said when I finished. You're trying to re-enter the exact same field after a 26-year gap. That's like trying to climb Mount Everest without training. Then what should I do? I need to work, Maggie. The settlement won't last forever. There was a moment of silence. What do you want to do? If you could choose anything? The question took me aback. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been secondary, aligned with Richard's needs and preferences. The concept of pure personal desire felt almost foreign. I don't know, I admitted. Then that's your first assignment, she declared. Figure out what you want, not what you think you can get, or what seems practical. What would make you actually look forward to getting out of bed? After we hung up, I sat at the table for a long time, contemplating her question. What would make me look forward to getting out of bed? In the depths of my post-Richard depression, the answer had been nothing. But before that, what had brought me joy? I made another list. Gardening. Cooking. Before it became just another household duty. Reading. Photography, abandoned after Emily was born. Volunteering at the animal shelter where we'd found Max. Small pleasures, not careers. But they were authentic, at least. Things I'd enjoyed for myself, not to please Richard or meet social expectations. The next day, Jessica called with an update on the divorce proceedings. We've submitted our response to your husband's initial proposal, she explained. As expected, his offer was significantly below what you're entitled to. Our counteroffer addresses the offshore account and requests additional support given the length of the marriage. What happens now? Now we negotiate. This typically takes time. Several months, sometimes longer. In the meantime, I've secured temporary support payments to cover your living expenses. Monthly checks from Richard. The thought made me cringe. Is there any way to just finish this quickly? I asked. I want to move on. Jessica's voice gentled. I understand that feeling, Mrs. Pearson, but rushing usually benefits the party with more power and information. In this case, your husband. A little patience now will serve you better in the long run. Patience. As if I hadn't already spent 29 years being patient, but I agreed, promising to forward any communication from Richard directly to her office. After the call, restlessness drove me out of the house for the first time in days without Maggie's prodding. Max needed a walk anyway, his arthritic legs stiffening from too much lying around. The November air was brisk, leaves crunching beneath our feet as we made our slow way around the neighborhood. Max stopped frequently to sniff, his old nose still eager for information about the world. I envied his simple pleasures, a good smell, a patch of sunlight, the comfort of routine. We passed the local shopping center with its grocery store, dry cleaner, and small cafe on the corner. I'd driven by countless times without really noticing it. Now, with Max needing a rest and the temperature dropping, the cafe's warm lights seemed inviting. Wait here, boy, I told Max, securing his leash to a bike rack near the door. I'll just be a minute. The first month as co-owner nearly broke me. The espresso machine, ancient but reliable, finally gave up, sputtering to a halt during morning rush hour. The repair estimate was astronomical, replacement costs even worse. I sat in the back office, after closing, head in my hands, wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. My phone buzzed with a text from Leon. How's it going? Fine, I lied. 3 dots appeared then. Liar. Despite everything, I smiled. I called him and confessed the situation. The Henderson account, he said after listening. Password is Max1234. What? Emergency fund. I never told you about it because I figured you'd need to learn the hard way at some point. Every good business has a cushion. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by determination. I'll pay you back. Of course you will. I could hear his grin through the phone. You're too stubborn not to. The new espresso machine arrived 3 days later, sleek, efficient, and terrifyingly complicated. I stayed late every night that week, practicing until my fingers could navigate its controls in the dark. Summer brought a heat wave that killed our air conditioning unit. Fall brought a health inspector with a grudge and a clipboard full of minor violations. Winter brought pipes that froze and burst in the storage room, destroying thousands of dollars in inventory. Each crisis taught me something new. About plumbing, about negotiating with vendors, about insurance claims, about my own resilience. Hired 2 new baristas, then a part-time bookkeeper when the paperwork became overwhelming. I invested in new tables, local art, better lighting. I started a small lending library in the corner, encouraging customers to take or leave books as they pleased. Slowly, steadily, the cafe evolved. So did I. The woman who had once lived for her husband's approval now made decisions without hesitation. The woman who had once faded into the background now greeted customers by name, hosted poetry readings, negotiated leases. Leon called weekly, offering advice when asked but mostly just listening as I talked through problems. "You don't need me anymore," he said one evening, after I described solving a complex supplier issue. "Don't be ridiculous," I replied. "Of course I do." But we both knew it wasn't true. 18 months after Richard walked out, Marigold Cafe was thriving. I no longer worked the early shift. I had staff for that now, but I still made a point of crafting perfect lattes for our regulars. My hands, once swollen with arthritis, were now strong and sure. I'd moved out of Richard's old desk and into a small but efficient office I'd carved out of unused storage space. The walls were painted bright yellow, marigold, of course, and decorated with cards from customers and photos of the staff. On my birthday, my 56th, the staff surprised me with a cake and a card signed by dozens of regulars. I read each message with a lump in my throat, amazed by how many lives had become intertwined with mine. That same evening, as I was closing up, a gentle knock came at the door. I looked up to see a man about my age, silver-haired and apologetic. "Sorry, we're closed," I called through the glass. "I know." His voice was muffled. "I just wanted to ask about the open mic night sign. My daughter's visiting next week and she writes poetry." I hesitated, then unlocked the door. "Thursday evenings, 7 to 9. Sign-up starts at 6:30. He nodded, then extended his hand. "I'm Thomas. Thomas Winters." Diana Pearson. His handshake was warm, his smile genuine. "This is a wonderful place you have here, Diana." "Thank you." I found myself smiling back. "Maybe I'll see you Thursday," he said, stepping back. "Maybe you will." After he left, I leaned against the counter, surprised by the flutter in my chest. It wasn't interest, exactly, or at least not just that. It was the realization that I was capable of feeling something again, of noticing someone. Thomas did come on Thursday with his daughter, a shy young woman whose poetry about climate change brought the house down. Afterward, he helped stack chairs without being asked, and we talked easily about books and music and his work as a high school English teacher. No numbers were exchanged. No promises made. But something had awakened. Possibility, perhaps. Life developed a rhythm I could never have imagined 2 years earlier. The cafe in the mornings, lunch with Maggie once a week. Max's gentle companionship, though he moved more slowly now, his muzzle almost completely white. I redecorated the house, removing every trace of Richard. Painted the walls colors he would have hated. Planted a vegetable garden in the backyard. Started taking weekend photography classes at the community college. Richard became a distant memory. A chapter closed, not forgotten but no longer defining. Until the morning he walked back into my life. It was a Tuesday in October, just over 2 years since that fateful dinner. I was at the counter, covering for a barista who had called in sick, when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up with my practiced smile, which froze on my face. Richard stood in the doorway, dressed in an expensive suit. Beside him was a woman, tall, blonde, beautiful in that polished way that spoke of regular facials and personal trainers. She wore a diamond on her finger that caught the light, throwing prisms across the ceiling. They were deep in conversation as they approached the counter, not really looking at me. And then Jeremy said the market projections were completely off, and I had to step in before Williams made a complete fool of himself, Richard was saying. Touchy. Woman, Vanessa, I presumed, laughed appreciatively, her hand on his arm. I could have stepped back, called another staff member to take their order, but something in me refused to hide. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady. "What can I get?" "For you?" Richard's head jerked up, his eyes widening in shock as recognition dawned. "Diana?" Vanessa glanced between us, confused, then uncomfortable as understanding set in. "Hello, Richard," I said calmly. "Nice to see you. What would you like to order?" He stared, taking in my appearance. I knew what he was seeing, silver hair-styled, in a fashionable bob, simple but elegant clothes, a woman standing straight and confident behind a counter. "You work here?" he finally managed, his tone suggesting both surprise and a hint of pity. I smiled and gestured to the cafe around us. The bustling tables, the art on the walls, the small but loyal line of customers waiting for their morning coffee. "No," I said quietly. "I built this." His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "After you left," I continued, my voice low enough that only he and Vanessa could hear. "I hit rock bottom, but then I discovered something important. Rock bottom makes an excellent foundation." Vanessa tugged at his sleeve. "Richard, we should go. We'll be late." But he seemed unable to move, staring at me as though seeing a ghost. "You left everything behind," I said, not unkindly. "The house, the car, the dog, me. And somehow, in losing it all, I found myself." A young barista appeared at my side. "Ms. Pearson, the delivery guy is here with the new furniture for the expansion. He needs you to sign." Richard's eyes widened at the Ms. Pearson and the word expansion. "Excuse me," I said politely. "Business calls. Jenny will take your order." I nodded to the barista before walking away, my back straight, my steps unhurried. Through the office window, I watched as Richard and Vanessa whispered urgently to each other, then left without ordering, the bell chiming their hasty exit. I should have felt triumph, or vindication. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace, as if the last tether to my old life had finally been cut. That evening, as I locked up, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I hadn't seen in 2 years. "Richard. You look good, Diana. I'm happy. For you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. He no longer had the power to impact my day, for better or worse. Instead, I called Thomas, whose friendly conversations over poetry nights had gradually evolved into coffee dates and long walks with Max. "Dinner tonight?" I asked when he answered. "I have a story to tell you." "I'd love that," he replied, his voice warm. "Your place or mine?" "Mine," I decided. "Max would love to see you." At home, I set the dining table, the same table where my marriage had ended and my new life had begun. I placed a vase of fresh marigolds in the center, their bright orange petals defiant against the coming winter. Thomas arrived with a bottle of wine and a gentle kiss on my cheek. Max greeted him with enthusiastic tail wagging, despite his arthritic hips. As we sat down to eat, Thomas raised his glass. "To unexpected journeys," he said. I smiled and touched my glass to his. "And to solid foundations." Later, as we sat on the porch swing watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Thomas's hand found mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The comfortable silence between us was nothing like the hollow silence that had once filled this house. Max settled at our feet with a contented sigh, and I realized with sudden clarity that this moment, this feeling, was what happiness felt like. Not the carefully curated life I'd maintained as Richard's wife, not the numb existence I'd endured after he left. This authentic, imperfect, hard-won peace. I had built this, piece by piece, from the ruins of what was supposed to be my forever. And it was more real, more genuinely mine than anything that had come before. In the distance, I could see the lights of downtown, where Richard and Vanessa lived in their penthouse. I felt no bitterness, no regret, just gratitude for the painful gift he'd unknowingly given me when he walked away. Rock bottom had indeed become my foundation. And on it, I had built something beautiful,